After having celebrated the Solemnity of Pentecost last week, today we are in ordinary time. But brothers and sisters, we must not think of ordinary time in the sense of the word of ordinary meaning trivial or commonplace or boring. In fact, the word ordinary time comes from the word ordinals, which just means numbers in a sequence. So like first, second, third, fourth, those are ordinals because they're numbers in a sequence. And so what are we numbering? We are counting the weeks from Christmas. So after the Christmas season is over, that begins with the first week of ordinary time, and then it continues counting. Then it takes a little break for Lent and then Easter, and now we continue counting through ordinary time. The mystery that we're contemplating today, the Holy Trinity, is something that is so extraordinary that we might think that it is impossible for us to understand. Yet I would say that it is through the ordinary means of living out our faith that we begin to understand it. So today is the solemnity of the Most Holy Trinity, a concept that is notoriously difficult for us mere human beings to understand. The Trinity is one God and three persons. The very nature of God Himself is an eternal exchange of love, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And He has destined us to be swept up into that exchange. How do we understand the mystery of the Trinity? Well, the first thing is I'll recognize the reason why it's difficult for us to understand the Trinity. And that's because God is perfectly unique, right? Because there's no other gods we can compare Him to. This is very different from other things we experience in life, isn't it? When you meet another human being, you have a whole database up here of other human beings that you've met that you can compare that person to. For instance, when you meet somebody and you can say they're tall. For instance, one of my classmates was 6'7". He was very tall. But I can say he's tall because I've met thousands and thousands of other human beings, and I know the general spectrum about which human beings are. And so I can say, that classmate of mine is tall because I've met so many other human beings. This even works for personality, doesn't it? That's a friendly person, or that's a shy person. Even these abstract concepts we can understand because we've met so many other human beings, and so we can compare the person we're meeting with all of those other humans we've met. We can't do this with God. Because what other God have you met? There are no other gods. So God is perfectly unique. And so that's why in His nature, He is very mysterious to us. But a mystery doesn't mean that we just throw our hands up and say, well, I guess that's it. I'm not even going to try. It's quite the opposite. When you're reading a good mystery novel, you want to find what the answer is at the end of it. You want to turn each page and get all of the clues. That's what makes it interesting. And that is what our faith is. And so how do we understand the mystery of the Trinity? Unfortunately, summing up the Trinity in words never works, other than the mere definition that God in His nature is one God who is three persons. But whenever we try to start using analogies, they always break down because, again, there's nothing in the natural world that can compare with God. Even the wonderful, famous analogy of St. Patrick with his shamrock, right? The shamrock with the three lobes on it. it's helpful. It's a nice visual thing to say, one nature in three persons. But unfortunately, the analogy breaks down in so far as, well, the shamrock is divisible. I can pluck the lobes of the shamrock off, right? And I can divide the shamrock, but it still remains a plant. Can't really do that with the Trinity. So all analogies break down at a certain point, and all words fail to describe. And so how do we pierce these mysteries of God? We do so, brothers and sisters, by living out our life and experiencing God firsthand. After all, isn't that how we know everything? Everything we've come to know in life is because we have some kind of experience with it. We've had some kind of encounter with a reality, and now we know that thing. So if we want to know God, we must make it our life's goal to seek Him without ceasing, to long for Him, to desire Him, and most importantly, to live out the life that He has laid out for us to the fullest. And when we do that, we become experts, so to speak, in the field of spirituality, and God reveals Himself to us in a way that is often indescribable by words. I'll use an example. My mother is a concert violinist. She spent many, many years of her life practicing the violin. In fact, when I was a kid, she would always play the violin at Mass. That's why I always really appreciate when Drew is here playing the violin for us at Mass. It brings up those wonderful memories my mother playing the violin at Mass. But after having become an expert, so to speak, in the violin, she would point out to me and my brother things that perhaps I wouldn't have known otherwise. Like when we were watching a movie or a TV show, often the actor is making movements on the violin that have nothing to do with the sound that you're actually hearing. And that's a pretty common thing. Or when you're watching a performance and the videographer is recording it, he'll sometimes zoom in on the violinist's face or pan over the crowd, and she'd be a little disappointed. We're missing the bowing and we're missing the fingerings. I kind of want to see that stuff. Well, that's something me, as somebody who didn't play the violin, wouldn't even really notice or pay attention to. But because she was an expert in it, she could see something in there that nobody else could see unless you were an expert in it. Brothers and sisters, this is how we come to know the mysteries of our faith, and especially how we come to know God. We have to live out the faith to the fullest in order to really understand and pierce the heights of heaven and see the mysteries of God. I can tell you, brothers and sisters, you can. You can do that. It works. I understand the Trinity on a level I've never thought I would when I was a kid. But it's often on a level that's indescribable because it's a mystery that is so deep and so complicated that mere words are just too simple. You have to live it out. And once you do, you become an expert, so to speak, in His revelation, in receiving His grace and receiving His blessing. And so, brothers and sisters, today as we meditate on the mystery of the Trinity, let us remember that in order to seek God, we must expand our desire for Him, long for Him, search for Him. He often shows us in the ordinary things of daily life, things that are extraordinary. He reveals His very self to us as long as we're watching, as long as we're listening, as long as we're truly desiring to know Him.